Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives. Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. Trump charges into Washington with a full head of steam. Trump gave an interesting and animated inauguration speech. The event was moved indoors, reportedly due to weather, but numerous reports indicated that security with the traditional outdoor venue was a major concern. Certainly, I hope with major changes at various federal agencies, Americans can anticipate that their president and the rest of us will be safe. Of particular note was his thank you to the large number of minorities who supported him in the election. He also previewed many of his promised executive orders. I cannot cover all of them here, but some of the biggies of the 100 or so from the first couple days. He halted 78 Biden-era executive actions. This was fully expected and is pure common sense, something lacking with Biden and his handlers. Withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord. This was a terrible deal, and Biden should never have reversed Trump's initial removal from this deal. China wants to be treated like a developing nation for this deal while trying to be big dogs on the international scene. Hey, they can't have it both ways. He pardoned about 1,500 people criminally charged in the January 6th Capitol protest while commuting the sentences for 6. This was fully expected and, of course, was made easier by the disgusting Biden pardons. He rescinded the 2021 Title IX order, which bans discrimination based on gender identity or sexual orientation in education programs that get federal funding. He declared a national emergency at the U.S.-Mexico border and designated drug cartels and Trendiagua and foreign terrorist organizations. He reversed Biden's recent removal of Cuba from the U.S. state sponsor terrorism list. Cuba is rarely mentioned since it's such a failed communist economy, but it helps to keep it in mind. And I have no intention of visiting there until it switches from communism back to capitalism. And hopefully they get a sensible government at some time. He ordered federal employees back to work in the office 5 days a week and ordered a federal hiring freeze, including exceptions for posts related to national security, public safety, and the military. This is long overdue. I call for hiring standards, their pay, and importantly, benefits to be set that no federal employee gets a better deal than a private sector employee doing a similar job. End the weaponization of the government against the political adversaries of the previous administration. I'm okay with this, providing that the Comer Commission works on quickly and thoroughly investigating Joe Biden selling his VP position to America's enemies. The family members pardoned by Biden will not be able to invoke the Fifth Amendment. This should smooth things out and either put them in jail or make them testify. It's time to get to the bottom of this. It's been going on too long. He's talked about imposing 25% tariffs on products from Mexico and Canada as of February 1. This trashes his famed USMCA from his first term. US, Mexico, and Canada joint trade agreement, and I have some real concerns about whether this can be done without demoing the whole USMCA. So let's see what happens there. He reversed Biden's order requiring 50% of new cars sold in 2030 to be EVs. Hey, this was a no-brainer as most America has already abandoned EVs. The Tesla and some of the other electric vehicles, people are very happy with them, but there's a limit to what they do and how people react to them. I don't think they're the ultimate solution, and I do favor getting away from gasoline-powered cars or diesel-powered vehicles, but I think we need something better. He proclaimed something that I think we all know from high school science. There are two biological sexes, male and female. Basic biology, folks, and the parents will be dancing at home as this will become mandatory in the out-of-touch public schools across America. End DEI within federal agencies. The private sector, as usual, is head of this with many recent announcements dumping DEI. This was discrimination, pure and simple, and it's a good idea to have true equal opportunity in hiring. He establishes the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, which of course has attracted a lot of attention under Elon Musk. Major crackdown on illegal aliens who commit crimes. This has been mostly the headline story under Tom Homan, who I have a great deal of confidence in. And again, they're not going to deport 10 million aliens. They're going after the 300,000, which is a ridiculous number of criminal aliens who are still in the United States. It's time to either lock them up or pack them out of here. Withdraws the U.S. from the global minimum tax agreement. Folks, I missed this one in 2021, but Biden and his crew got screwed again in international deals by agreeing to a minimum 15% cross-country tax, and somebody claimed that they were going to give America its fair share. Yeah, nonsense. He ordered the Attorney General to pursue the death penalty for the killing of law enforcement officer or any capital crime committed by an illegal immigrant. Hey, I'm a staunch supporter of the death penalty. We must switch our justice system to protect the public and especially the victims and their families. He withdraws the U.S. from the World Health Organization. This makes sense given the U.S.'s disproportionate financial support of an agency that often looks very anti-American. He revoked the security clearance for ex-National Security Advisor John Bolton. I think that's kind of personal. And 51 intelligence officials who said Hunter Biden's laptop bore classic earmarks of Russian disinformation. This is the old payback is hell situation, and well earned by the clowns he listed. This one I don't really care about. He says he renamed the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Yeah, but on Alaska's Mount Denali, no, it was never Mount Denali. It's been Mount McKinley since Alaska became part of the United States. It is Denali National Park, and Mount McKinley sits in it, and I certainly agree with that designation. It's the one that I understand as a longtime American. Biden only had a few days left in office after the Supreme Court said that they would uphold Congress's decision to ban Chinese ownership of TikTok in the United States. But one of my concerns here is a number of the people in anticipation of TikTok failing have gone to something called Red Note, which is also under the control of the communist Chinese, and that's not helping out. In Trump's case, he said he feels like a lot of younger people voted for him because he deliberately used TikTok. I disagreed with that decision. I think he could have used Instagram, Facebook, X, and so forth, and done just as well. So, but in any event, Trump has announced he's not going to enforce the ban on TikTok ownership by China for 75 days. 4 separate suits were filed on Inauguration Day to stop DOGE. The key issues here are that unions of the federal employees want to protect their cushy jobs despite the enormous and growing federal deficit. The first suit was brought by Public Citizen, State Democracy Defenders Fund, and the American Federation of Government Employees. No surprise there. A suit was brought by the Center for Biological Diversity, apparently harassing Trump over the climate change hoax. The third one was brought by national security counselors. Their slogan is shining a light into the corners of the national security community and helping those who live there. Given Trump's promise of full transparency, this might just be reinforcing the Trump plan anyway. Number 4 was brought by the American Public Health Association, American Federation of Teachers, a commie operation in my opinion, Minority Veterans of America, Vote Vets Action Fund, the Center for Auto Safety, Citizens Responsibility, and Ethics in Washington. The suit attempts to block DOGE on the basis that the gravy train for some of these groups will be cut off. I do want to note that I'm a lifetime supporter of vets. However, even there, just about every federal agency is failing at its job while costing ridiculous amounts of our hard-earned money. And of course, all the feds can borrow on top of our hard-earned money. Time to get things running a little bit better. So let's see if we can make things provide better services but spend less money. What a unique concept. That's what we have to do in the private sector, folks. Mario Rubio has already been confirmed for the new Secretary of State position. This was expected to be an easy appointment and confirmation, and it was. It could be a good omen for various other candidates, and they seem to be doing well in their hearings. Still facing uncertainty are 3, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, and Kash Patel. I have mixed emotions about RFK Jr., but I think the Democrats would get what they deserve if they put RFK in the U.S. government under Trump. Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel, good people. I think they could do a good job. I believe Trump has done a much better appointment job than the last time. Trump has announced he'll be replacing about 1,000 political appointments. He's already canned a few folks, including the admiral heading the Coast Guard. She was much more concerned with DEI than having an effective Coast Guard. Footlocker is closing more stores. I previously mentioned that Footlocker would be closing some of its 2,400 stores. Well, they have announced they will add another 400 stores to the list being closed. By the way, its brand includes 125 Champ Sports. As I mentioned in previous reports, many large multi-unit operations have been cutting back as the economy changes rapidly. Others include Walgreens, CVS, GameStop, TGI Fridays, Walmart, Pizza Hut, Best Buy, Applebee's, and so on. It's a long list, folks. Interestingly, Foot Locker will be opening larger stores in the future, and the new format stores will exceed 400 locations. So they're going to close a bunch, including the previous announcement, but they're going to be adding these new big fancier stores they're hoping will attract more people. Also on the business front, the Wall Street Journal announced that mortgage rates have topped 7% for the first time since mid-2024. This is a bad omen for the 2025 housing market, which has been struggling for quite a while. Keep in mind that the housing market is actually very important to the overall U.S. economy. We often focus on retail sales, but the sales and the construction of houses is equally important. Of course, the irony of Joe the Demented claiming that he left the country in good shape, not so true, of course, as we all know, as we all hunt around and look at our couches for a few extra quarters to make sure we can pay the bills. The housing market's a key indicator, as I said, and not leaving 2024 in good shape. Ghost jobs becoming a large problem in the employment world. This is an interesting story from KTRH. Story relates that many of the jobs posted are not real jobs. So an applicant applies for what could be the perfect job, never hears anything. The job posting, however, is still there. So this is the world of ghost jobs, the time spent filling in the blanks, especially applicants with experience and degrees, never hear anything. The article cites a workplace expert who estimates that 30 to 40% of job postings are fake. So why would this be happening? Maybe the employer forgot to take it down. Maybe they hired someone. On the dark side, the article suggests that job postings could give investors the illusion of growth for those employers. There can be long-term consequences where applicants learn to avoid certain employers, so they lose out, the companies lose out on the best talent. Also, if this is really false posting for investor flash, then there could be legal consequences like investigations by the Securities and Exchange Commission. One of the suggestions was to review LinkedIn and other sources to see if the employer that has posted the job really has some hiring activity going on. So do some additional online research to see what the current financial reports are for larger companies. Of course, that's not always true for smaller companies. For the eager job seekers, ghost can be a real problem. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I'm sure that you will agree that she deserves the moniker of interesting person. Saving America welcomes Tracy Cramp-Perkins, who is an award-winning author, a four-time dementia caregiving survivor with 16 years of experience caring for four family members with various dementias and other illnesses. It is her mission to supply caregivers with the proven shortcuts to reduce the stresses of dementia care. Tracy teaches hands-on solutions for reducing repetitive questions, meltdowns, and wandering. She includes tips using simple, inexpensive fixes found at hardware and office supply stores. Tracy holds a Bachelor of Science from Central Washington University. She worked her way through college with a variety of positions. For the last 18 years, Tracy has been a managing partner at Perkins Power Products, a manufacturer's representative agency serving the industrial electrical industry in the Pacific Northwest. Prior to forming Perkins Power, for 11 years, she worked her way up the ranks from the laboratory administrative assistant to the regional laboratory director for Bureau Veritas, Industries and Facilities Division in Seattle, Washington. She is the author of Dementia Home Care, How to Prepare Before, During, and After, and is the host of the Dementia Home Care Show on the USA Global TV and Radio Network, one of our networks for this show, Saving America. We welcome Tracy Cramp-Perkins for her first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you very much for such a wonderful introduction, Dr. Dave. I really appreciate that.
Hey, we want people to know what a super person you are. As you know, we asked three formatted questions based on our research. And our first question is, your book covers so many topics. Why is it important to have such a resource when dealing with a person with dementia?
Well, no one is born knowing how to care for someone with dementia. And with most of us, we don't even know what to do or recognize what dementia is until it's well into the disease. And by that time, there's not a lot of support tools advertised out there that is really in general knowledge. And what happened with my family and me is I got a panic phone call from my younger sister. She said that my dad was unconscious on the floor of his living room. And when he woke up a week later in the hospital, he was diagnosed with moderate Alzheimer's disease. So it really caught us off guard. And because we didn't have all the paperwork in place properly, I didn't have the right power of attorney to take him out of the hospital, and they refused to let me take him home. He ended up on a going from facility to facility, with the dementia without them allowing us to bring him home. And he knew that he was more advanced than what was going on around him, that he could still figure things out. And so he would figure out how to escape. And from each facility, he escaped 5 times because he's a very, very intelligent man. And on the fifth escape, they would eject him. There was one point, or I should let me back up. They were giving him medications to make him more compliant. Each time he would go to a new facility, they give him a different medication, but they never took him off any of the previous medications. So at one point, he actually threatened to kill his roommate because he had a hallucination that his roommate, who was bedridden, was threatening him. And so that landed him in a geriatric psych hospital. And because we, as the family, didn't understand what was going on around us, we got rather aggressive with the people that were caring for him because we didn't understand how hard it was for them. We didn't have any compassion because we had no understanding. And so they refused to tell us where he was sent. And so we ended up spending 4 hours calling every hospital in 3 counties until we found him. And so we had, like I said, a 6-month journey. He ended up going to 5 additional facilities and 1 more trip to the geriatric psych ward before we could bring him home. So we got a trial by fire in learning how to navigate the medical system, how to navigate the legal system, because we had to get the power of attorney. And we shortcutted it. Most people can't get it that fast. 6 months is incredibly quick through the legal system. It's just lucky I am local to where my dad was. People knew him, they felt bad, and they helped him. So that part was very helpful. And I can't say that will happen for everybody, but every time I failed while I was caregiving, it took the book you're seeing behind me, it took me, that's the 25% that worked, because the 75% that went up in flames, that didn't make it into the book. And I covered every single little step for every failure I went through. And some of the things I didn't even go through, like elder abuse, but it was an important topic to cover. So there's a lot of things in the book.
That's pretty amazing. And I assume there's a little footnote here for all of us that the time to do those power of attorneys and wills and no recourse paperwork is while you've still got all of your faculties.
Yes. And the other part to that is let's talk about fear, because fear is false evidence appearing real. And people keep putting it off, thinking, oh, this will never happen to me, thinking that if they put it off, then they can avoid it entirely. And what that does is that ends up with whoever is left behind, whoever is taking care of your legal work later, has to straighten all this out. And if they don't have the legal documents in place, it makes it very, very difficult for your family members or loved ones to carry out your wishes. And if they don't know your
Absolutely.
wishes, they can't honor them.
Absolutely. Very well said. And then our second question was, have you found that some persons with dementia simply cannot be taken care of at home and must be institutionalized?
Yes, and there's several different reasons this can happen. One of them is if the care partner, let's say it's been a couple that's been married 58 years, and the care partner dies, then the only place they can go is to be institutionalized. If they have a health issue that is beyond somebody's ability to care for them, they could end up being institutionalized. So there's several different routes to end up having somebody in a skilled care facility because they need the extra help. And it isn't a failure on the part of the caregiver. It's too much for the caregiver to take care of themselves. Because again, we're not born knowing how to be dementia care providers. We're not born being medical practitioners. You learn by failure. You learn by step trying to get through it.
And in those cases, one of the things that kind of cursed me anytime I see the word institutionalized, and I was thinking about your 6 month struggle, is what did the medical bills look like?
Well, that was a very interesting question that you asked because my mom had cancer. They hit, before she died, they hit the insurance ceiling. This was before Obamacare. And so they lost everything. All they lost their home, all their life savings, everything to paying off the bills for that. My dad ended up by the time he was in the hospital in Medicaid. And so he had Medicaid and Medicare. So that and my sister's grand skill of getting grants, we were able to cover all of their expenses. Otherwise, we couldn't have. And today, it's really wonderful. Today, there are more people giving grants to help people with care, including places like, oh gosh, um, Hilarity for Charity. They do grants for younger caregivers who are caring for family members who got early onset dementias, and so then they can actually have respite care and things like that. So there's monies available. You just have to know how to find them.
And of course, you mentioned something that's a very special area, which is early onset dementia or early onset Alzheimer's, which is a very aggressive form of the disease. And usually, my understanding is the survival situation is very short, 6 months to a year. And we think of dementia as something, and not to be political, but what we see on the international stage with Joe Biden, who clearly is showing signs of dementia, couldn't find his way up the stage and stuff. But that is the more traditional form where people begin to show a series of symptoms, but they're not, completely out of the program yet, versus early onset Alzheimer's, which is a very devastating disease. And I think the average onset in that is what, between 40 and 45?
It can be. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's considered early onset anything before 70. So generally
Mm-hmm.
speaking, the average age is 65 when between 50 or 60 and 65 when it hits.
Yes.
For many people, like if you took it at Laura Rogan Miller Rogan, her mom got it at the age of, I believe it was 55 and was
Mm-hmm.
gone within 3 years. So it goes very quickly. It's not it's a very progressive disease, kind of like ALS in that regard, because it
Yes.
just happens so fast.
I was at a networker a few days ago, and 80-year-old gentleman sitting next to me mentioned that he had lost his first wife due to ALS. And of course, that's a very rapidly moving and devastating disease, also known as the baseball player's disease. It's very, very sad situation. And our third question, what can people learn from your webcast on the USA Global TV and Radio Network? What do people hear about there?
Oh, thank you for that question. I try to bring in experts and caregivers, anyone who has lived experience or professional experience with dementia to teach people how to take care of different aspects. So I have had people like Loretta Vaney on. She's the Lego lady. She teaches Lego serious play, but with her, it's a distraction and communication techniques using Legos because there's no rules with Legos. And so you can use it to communicate with how somebody's feeling, to keep somebody from agitation. You can put that in their hands and allow them to create. Again, no rules, no structure. They can do whatever they like and no one can tell them they're wrong, which is happens a lot. Why people get upset because everyone keeps correcting them. This gives you a freedom to just play. And so it's a wonderful tool. I've also had PK Bevel on. She's the inventor of the virtual dementia tour. And with that, she teaches family caregivers and professional caregivers what it feels like to have dementia. And it's a 15-minute tour. They put you in a space like an apartment and they give you different, I shouldn't say commands, but they give you different instructions on just simple things like sitting down in a chair and tying your shoes, walking across the room, picking up coins off of your dresser, just simple things. But when you have the visor on, you get the achromatopsia that comes with dementia. So you're going to get the tunnel vision. You kind of see in black and white. It's very difficult to see, and it's just through a slit lens. You have headphones on that gives you a similar feeling of the tinnitus that is happening for somebody, let's say, with Alzheimer's disease. So it's very hard to process what someone's saying to you. They put in the gloves to make it difficult for you to feel so that you understand what the nerve degeneration is like. And also, they put pads in your shoes. So again, it makes it difficult to feel the floor, which is why you might see dementia patients walking with shuffled footsteps because they can't feel the floor, and that's their way of solving that problem. One of my friend's mothers has macular degeneration as well as dementia. She lives in her home and it has cement steps outside it. And when she leaves her home, instead of holding the guardrail, she can't see, so she bends in half. Now she's 90 years old, and she touches her way with her hands because she can't feel it with her feet for each step. And it's terrifying to watch because you think she's going to fall at any moment, and there's no way to really catch her because there's not enough space to have somebody there to catch her. So, I mean, it's a lot of different things that can happen because, and if you have the compassion to understand how it feels, it makes it easier to cope with it.
Well, that is some really fascinating information, and I think very helpful to some of the many Americans who are facing these type of challenges with loved ones, unfortunately. And as we talked about, is hardly any family is completely saved from it, and just tends to be what type of resources are available and things like that. Now, how can our audience get more information about you, your book, and your webcasts?
Well, you can reach me on my website at tracycramperkins.com. You can also reach me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. My book is available in wide release, so you can find it on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, Target, Walmart, your favorite independent bookseller, and also your local library.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Tracy Cram Perkins, for your wonderful information, and it's so helpful. It's so great to meet you. Christian school punished for forfeiting game with transgender player. This is a concerning report based on a recent article by Elizabeth Troutman Mitchell in the Daily Signal. I include my normal disclaimer that I am not opposed to persons who have made the serious decision to undertake gender reassignment surgery and treatment. However, I do oppose biological males competing against females. It is simply unfair. And the reality of anatomy is that once a male has gone through puberty, the development of muscle and size is already accomplished. No amount of hormone treatments can reverse that advantage. Throughout this school year, there have been numerous reports of college women's teams forfeiting games rather than risking injury playing against a trans male on other teams. This new report is about a high school women's team from Mid-Vermont Christian School in Burlington, Vermont. It forfeited a girls' high school basketball game in November 2023 against a team that had a male athlete playing for it. In retaliation, the Vermont Principals Association reportedly kicked the school out of the association and denied it public funding through the state's tuition program. The issue is that other teams across the country have faced no penalties for declining to play teams with biological male players. This appears to be a targeting of a Christian team. Alliance Defending Freedom is representing the Christian school against the Vermont Principals Association. Hopefully they will prevail. The article states that almost 3/4 of the voters say they believe medals awarded to biological men who beat females in sports should be given instead to the women who lost. And 72% of registered voters think biological males should not be allowed to participate in women and girls sports, according to national polling from RMG Research. I note that I've heard no protest of biological females trying to play in men's sports or using their locker rooms. I wonder why. I also note that this issue is very prominent in the Allred Cruz senatorial campaign mentioned earlier. The wide margin of victory for Cruz would appear to confirm that voters do not want biological men in female sports or their locker rooms. As a parent of daughters and granddaughters, I certainly feel that way. Business students, business persons, or consumers, business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. The U.S. Supreme Court strikes down an injunction preventing the government from pressuring big tech to suppress free speech. In a ruling that may surprise many who follow SCOTUS, the conservative-dominated court did not delve into the allegations of the case of Murphy v. Missouri, which was brought against the government by Attorney General Missouri and others, including activist Jill Hines, who claimed injury due to the actions of possible censorship. The claim relates to COVID-19 commentary. During the recent pandemic, reportedly, social media outlets were directed by agents of the federal government to suppress stories that criticized the COVID-19 vaccines and other government mandates like the famous 6-foot rule and wearing masks and so forth. The SCOTUS ruling was backed by all 3 liberal justices, and they were joined by 3 of the conservative justices. So kind of an odd mix here. The holding was that the plaintiff lacked standing under Article 3 of the Constitution, since the plaintiffs failed to show that they were both directly injured and would continue to be injured due to government censorship. The 3 most conservative members of the court filed a very strong dissent in the case. Some of the language of Justice Alito, who wrote the dissent, is instructive. This is one of the most important free speech cases to reach this court in years. This evidence was more than sufficient to establish Hines standing to sue. Consequently, we are obligated to tackle the free speech issue that the case presents. He continued. The court, however, shirks that duty and thus permits the successful campaign of coercion in this case to stand as an attractive model for future officials who want to control what people say, hear, and think. Pretty disturbed justice there, folks. The bottom line is that the issue remains unresolved at this point. Many have commented that if the allegations regarding government censorship are true, this is a violation of the First Amendment to the Constitution and should be resolved by the High Court. The U.S. Supreme Court strikes another blow to the administrative state. The case was styled Corner Post Incorporated versus Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, FRS. The background of the case is instructive. The Federal Reserve System governs what the banks can charge for handling fees for debit cards. These are the fees that businesses pay to the banks for issuing the cards and handling the payments. For a small business, these fees can consume a real portion of their profit margins. The regs in question were promulgated in 2011. Corner Post opened a convenience store in 2018, or 7 years after the above regulation went into effect. In 2021, Corner Post joined other companies in suing the FRS for allowing the banks to charge excessive fees for handling debit card transactions. The FRS defended by saying that the Administrative Procedures Act, or APA, only allowed challenges for 6 years. By now, this regulation was 10 years old. However, Corner Post had only been in business for 3 years. So Corner Post appealed on the basis that it could not have challenged a regulation that happened years before it even existed. The company prevailed when the High Court ruled that an APA claim does not accrue for the purposes of APA Section 2401A, 6-year statute of limitations, until the plaintiff is injured by the final agency action. The court further explained that an APA plaintiff may not file suit and obtain relief until they suffered injury from that final agency action. The statute of limitations does not begin to run until there is an injury. The SCOTUS majority also contrasted the limitations period with a statute of repose, which is something we don't talk about very often. We're not going to get into that esoteric legal discussion here. The decision is consistent with recent decisions of SCOTUS limiting the power of the EPA and other federal agencies. Note that this case only decided that Corner Post can get its day in court. It will still have to prove its damages in trial court. Death camp survivor and pro-life activist convicted over peaceful pro-life protest. The Daily Signal reported that a Michigan jury has found 7 pro-life activists guilty of engaging in a conspiracy against rights and violations of the freedom of access to clinic entrances, also known as FACE, F-A-C-E. The allegations are that they were peacefully protesting outside of an abortion clinic. The prosecution was led by the Justice Department Civil Rights Division under Assistant Attorney General Kirsten Clark. The prosecution was not just under the FACE Act, but I want to emphasize there was also a felony prosecution for conspiracy against rights. However, that law was intended to go after groups like the Ku Klux Klan, not quiet protesters at abortion clinics. The story has attracted national attention since the current administration has been prosecuting pro-lifers under the FACE Act, but has not been prosecuting persons committing violence against pro-life facilities. It was also notable that an 89-year-old woman, Eva Edel, who is a Holocaust survivor, was one of the 7 convicted in Michigan. Ms. Edel has devoted her life to protecting unborn babies. She was quoted by the Daily Signal as saying, "I feel very strongly because of my background that human life is sacred." In reviewing this case and similar cases, I wonder if the First Amendment was brought up in this matter. Blocking an entrance to a facility or committing violence would clearly violate the FACE Act. However, peaceful protests would seem to be specifically permitted under the First Amendment. So the question would seem to be where these protesters were standing at the time of the alleged violations, and if they were truly nonviolent. It would also seem a higher court review should be involved in the conspiracy against rights allegations due to the possible misuse of that federal statute. Earlier this year, Congressman Chip Roy initiated an investigation into whether these laws were being equally enforced against protesters from both points of view regarding abortion. This is an ongoing story. The problem of squatters and owners' rights. As a property owner myself, it has caught my attention that throughout the United States, a problem has arisen. The term used is squatters. These are people who illegally occupy real estate that belongs to another person or company. In one report, some houses here in Texas that were vacant because they were bought to clear the way for a possible high-speed rail line were being occupied by squatters. This caused real problems for the nearby residents of homes that were not purchased by the rail company. Where were the police in this situation? Apparently, local residents could not evict them or charge them with trespassing. Only the rail company could do that. From New York City, in what surely seems to be a scene from the Twilight Zone, a report by the Pacific Legal Foundation mentions that earlier this year, a woman was arrested for changing the locks to her own $1 million property in Queens after a squatter had allegedly moved in. Right, the owner was arrested, not the squatters. Another report that I interviewed said the owner is still required to keep up the taxes and utilities on the property that she cannot enter and occupy. The Pacific Legal Foundation defines squatters as people who live in or on someone else's property, though they don't have any legal claim to it, don't own it, and don't have permission to be there. During the development of the center of America, there were something called homestead rights. A family could settle on 160 acres of land, declare that they would settle it, and after 5 years of farming, they would own it. We also have adverse possession laws that vary from state to state, but those laws are very specific. For instance, in most cases, a tenant who holds over after their lease ends can never claim the property under adverse possession. In these recent cases, the persons are often not following adverse possession rules, and in fact, the legitimate owners are trying to get them out of the properties. They have been told that they have to follow complicated and time-consuming eviction laws instead of being able to have the persons arrested for simple trespassing. Saving America welcomes John R. Miles. He is an entrepreneur, award-winning podcast host, former U.S. Navy officer, and a Fortune 50 senior executive. He is a leading authority on intentional behavior change. He is the author of Passion Struck, 12 Powerful Principles to Unlock Your Purpose and Ignite Your Most Intentional Life. These principles are applied to a person's mindset and behavior. Miles discovered these by examining and interviewing successful professionals such as Mark Bainoff, David Rubenstein, Katie Milkman, Bernie Marcus, Yuri Levine, Marshall Goldsmith, Robin Sharma, Susan Cain, Sean Springs, Thaddeus Bullard, Elon Musk, Susan Wojcicki, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Navy SEALs astronaut Chris Cassidy, and General Stanley McChrystal, who we see on the news occasionally. His book, Passion Struck, is a gold winner as recognized by the Nonfiction Authors Association. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. We welcome John Miles for his first appearance on Saving America.
Oh, David, such an honor to be here, and love the name of your podcast and also your book that you wrote about on the same topic.
Thank you so much, John. So let's get our audience up to speed on what you're up to. So you were describing a very specific area of expertise. Please share with the audience how you came to pursue this specific type of research.
I think we are best positioned to serve the person who we once were. And in my case, I was living what many people would call the dream life. I found myself in the C-level of a Fortune 50 organization. We were making $60 billion in revenue, and I should have been the happiest, most fulfilled in my entire career. And I felt just the opposite, completely lost, out of control in many ways with the way my life was going from a personal perspective, because I was living it in a very unbalanced way. And I was so much consumed with my career that I was letting, in retrospect, the most important elements of my life, my health, my mental health, my relationships, etc., take second fiddle to this all-encompassing growth track that I found myself on. And I don't think I'm immune to the fact of this happening. I think so many people live life today as I was, which Henry David Thoreau coined as quiet desperation, where we find ourselves stuck in this spot where we're living the life we feel we should be living and not the ideal life that we've been put on earth to do. And so what I've really documented is my own personal, what I call me search and path to going from where I was to doing the career and life that I have now. And so what I found was at the core of all of that was living life intentionally, meaning I really discovered that it's the intentional choices that we make, the micro choices that make up the moments, the seconds, the minutes, the hours of our every single day of life that we live that ultimately culminate into what I like to call the tsunami of greatness or the waterfall of despise. And you can choose to live your life wisely and end up in one scenario, or choose to live it the other way and end up in that valley of despair. And so that's what this whole movement is really about, is how do you create intentional choices every single day that get you closer to living your self-realized self.
Wow, what a powerful statement. So explain to our audience how your book, Passion Struck, can help people in various fields of work, because we're not all office workers and things like that. So how does that work?
So people often have asked me, looking back on your life, what would you tell your 20-something-year-old self? And my response is, I would give them a copy of this book, because I wrote Passion Struck not just for the office workers, as you said, but anyone who fits one of these different profiles. Perhaps you're a high achiever no matter where you're at, but you're stagnant or you're stuck where you're at. How do you break through? And as Marshall Goldsmith said, get from where you're at to where you want to be. The other group of people are those who feel really stuck in their life, and they find themselves in that quiet desperation that I found myself in, and they don't know how to break through the chasm of the life they've created to the one that they could, if they're intentional about it, create for themselves. And then the last group of people would be new college graduates or young adults who are looking to chart their course in life. So I kind of oriented it so it would fit any one of those. And I think, similar to your books, what I am realizing is that not only the United States, but most Western countries are in a period of decades of decline. I mean, if you look at the charts on entrepreneurship, which made the United States the envy of everyone else worldwide, we're in 4 to 5 decades of decline, and it's not ending. And I believe a big reason for this is we have decided in so many cases to take the path like I took, which was the safe path. I came out of my time as a military officer, and when my opportunity to go in the FBI didn't happen, I ended up in the business world. And there was a point during that trajectory when I was at Arthur Andersen, actually in Houston, where you're based, where the whole company, because of the Enron fiasco, disintegrated before my eyes, right as I was putting on partner. So the timing couldn't have been any worse. And I had a chance at that point to go down the entrepreneurial route myself. But I think I was conditioned to kind of see that the way that my life was going was to work for a company, work my way up, do the classical type of job structure that my father did. And I think a lot of people are entrapped in that thinking, and not thinking of how your life could be different. And I really believe that with the onset of all the digital disruption that's around us, AI, robotics, etc., that life as we know it in work, regardless of what industry you're in, is completely evolving. And the one thing that you can do to take charge is to live your life as if you are a constant learning machine. Because the one thing that you're going to need to do if you want to be able to take charge of your career and your life with all the change around us is to stay ahead of it. So that's what the book really teaches you, is how to use passion, perseverance, and intentionality, all coupled with a constant learning mindset, to really create the path to a life that feels fulfilling and allows you to really outplay the forces that are going to completely disrupt millions and millions of lives over the next 2 decades.
It's such an impressive situation, and I can certainly relate to that. As you know, we ask 3 questions and we try and keep it short. So you've got 12 principles in your book. We don't have time to cover all of that, but would you like to share with our audience a couple examples, 2 or 3 examples, so they'll know what to see or expect in your book?
Sure. The book is created out of 3 different sections. The first one and the second one all go into these shifts or principles that I talk about. 6 of them are mindset shifts and 6 of them are behavior shifts. And then the last section of the book I call the psychology of progress is really using behavior science, psychology, and neuroscience to implement them into your life. So out of the 12 principles, a few that might resonate with people, one would be the mosquito auditor. I'd like to use metaphors so that people would remember these concepts. And this has been a fan favorite. I happen to be listening to a radio program where the announcer asked, "What is the most dangerous animal on the planet?" And like all the listeners who were calling in, we all got it wrong. We were all thinking sharks or lions, spiders, this, that. It turns out that it's the mosquito. And even today, as we're recording this, on the front page of the Wall Street Journal was another mosquito-borne illness that is starting to go global.
Yes.
So the reason why I ended up doubling down on this is mosquitoes by themselves feel so benign. I mean, oftentimes we'll hear their buzzing, but we don't really take them seriously in much of the Western world because we get bitten, we have some itching, we don't think that they do much harm, but that's really not the case in much of the world where it's killing millions of people each year. The same thing go for the invisible influences in our lives. And I lay out in the book 3 different types of mosquitoes. They're more than this, but I thought this was 3 clear examples: the bloodsucker, the invisible suffocator, and the pain in the ass. So that is one chapter, and I write it in a way for your personal life, and I also go through examples for your career as well. I think in the second section where I go into the behavioral shifts, there are a number here that are really important, but I'll go to the last one. I wrote this chapter on the concept of being a conscious engager. And I was really exploring here all the distractions in life that are keeping us from becoming the best person that we can become. And people often say, you know, John, you're living your life on autopilot. And I think it's the wrong analogy because on autopilot, at least the plane is going in typically a positive direction. I think the better analogy that I explore is that we're living our lives more like we're pinballs aimlessly drifting through the game of pinball, not controlling the pinball, but letting the game play us. And I think it's a great analogy for how so many of us live our lives. And in this chapter, I really explore the wisdom of Stephen Covey, specifically his adage that the main thing about the main thing is keeping the main thing the main thing. And so oftentimes, as we chart our course, we have a main thing, which is typically the values that we live our lives against. Yet, with all the distraction around us, they often get pushed to the wayside. And I think it's when that happens, we find ourselves living unintentionally, just going through the motions like the aimless pinball. And I go through much more exploration than that. But those are just 2 quick examples of the 12 principles.
Really amazing, John. Sounds like a tremendous book. How can our audience get more information about you and your book?
Well, thank you for asking me that. The best 2 ways would either be to go to the company website that I'm a part of, Passionstruck, PASSIONSTRUCK, just like the book behind me, or my personal website, John, middle initial R, Miles.com. You can find the book wherever books are, and you can find my podcast, Passionstruck, wherever podcasts are.
Very disturbing story. China to unveil J-35 jet built with stolen U.S. technology. This is from an important report from the Washington Times that has received far too little attention. The story reports that Chinese military hackers stole more than 50 terabytes of data from U.S. government and defense contractor networks, data that included details of the F-35 stealth radar and engine secrets, as well as details of the F-35AN AAS-37 electro-optical distributed aperture system. Yes, folks, that's a mouthful. Many other critical aspects that were incorporated in the U.S. stealth jet have been taken by the Chinese. The Red Chinese first incorporated it into their J-20 jets and now into their J-35 jets. Anybody notice it's the same number even as we're using in the U.S. military? We have the best technology and we have to stop giving it away. People need to get fired, go to jail, and in the right cases, I favor military tribunals and prompt executions. I'm a staunch supporter of the death penalty, and saving our country from losing a potential future war with Red China is at that level, in my opinion. Outcome of the minimum wage and paid sick leave measures on various state ballots. Note that the federal minimum wage has been $7.25 since 2009, and I support either keeping it there or simply removing it. I get criticized for that from some quarters. Folks, I'm not mean, nor am I blind. I pay people that work for me well over that. Why? Because I pay the going wage for the specific work being done in this urban area where the cost of living is high. The bogus argument about a minimum wage needing to be a so-called living wage is that not all jobs can economically pay this artificially calculated amount. Further, the cost of living varies dramatically across the country and even significantly within state lines. Time and again, statistics establish that raising the minimum wage costs jobs for students and individuals lacking good work skills. So here's how the minimum wage and paid sick leave measures fared in a few states. This is based on a post-election report by NPR, their reporter Andrea Zhu. Alaska and Missouri approved ballot measures to raise the minimum wage and require employers to provide paid sick time to their workers. For Alaska, the minimum wage will gradually rise to $15 an hour by July 1st, 2027, up from $11.73 currently. That's the lowest on the West Coast. After that, the minimum wage will be adjusted to keep pace with inflation. In Missouri, the minimum wage will gradually rise to $15 an hour by January 1st, 2026, up from $12.30 currently. Starting in 2027, an annual inflation adjustment will be applied. And the article notes that these are both so-called red states, meaning dominant Republican states. Hey, just because it's a dominant Republican state doesn't mean that the voters do smart things. Missouri and Alaska say yes to paid sick leave. In both Missouri and Alaska, employers will now be required to give workers 1 hour of sick leave for every 30 hours worked. Missouri provides some exceptions for small businesses. Oh, isn't that nice? Nebraska voters also approved a ballot measure giving workers the right to earn paid sick leave, but Nebraska's measure does not specify the rate of accrual. Note that Californians will again be voting to raise the minimum wage, but at the time of this recording, the outcome was uncertain, but leaning well towards rejection. I note that a large number of fast food restaurants closed as a result of California's high minimum wage at present. Hey folks, there's no such thing as free lunch. You can legislate paying more wages and benefits, but you cannot legislate businesses to have employees to pay it. I predict there will be less small business activity, more part-time work to avoid some of these coverages, and dramatically increased automation. Let's think about these things before we put them on ballots. And please, voters, think about the impact across the board when you vote for these things. Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.